Hey, yay, 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 yay. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about order of operations and two different things. We're going to talk about order of operations as far as the project itself goes, and then afterwards we're going to talk about order of operations in terms of balance, which seems like it seems like a good lesson. So we're going to do that. And then next week we'll get into tips and tricks and maybe even just start mixing. I don't know. But anyway, so let's get to it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is this little list. And I want to talk about each of the items on this list because this is another thing. Like everything that I'm doing on the channel is to educate people in the definitions of stuff that they may not know. Like again, I got guys that are 40, 30 to 40 years old that have been doing this for forever that just don't understand what these things mean. And it's okay. Like, it's okay to not understand that, but life is so much easier when you do. So here I am. I'm going to help you out. So this is the order in which a song gets created. First, you write the song. Then there's the production recording process. Then there's the mix prep. There's the mix prep process. Say that 5 times fucking fast. Then mixing, and then mastering. I'm going to explain what these things are real quick. If you already know, skip ahead. So, the songwriting is what it sounds like. If somebody's helping you with that, then it's whatever, but songwriting is songwriting. Orchestration, we're going to come back to in a minute. Production. Production ranges, it depends on what genre you're working in, but usually the producer is the guy that oversees the record and that makes choices for the band. A lot of times you'll see that a record is produced by the band and by a producer. And it means that they're making decisions about the music together. Very rarely do you see that a band has produced a record themselves just because they don't have the technical know-how to be able to do so. And we'll talk more about production in a minute. And in hip-hop, rap, trap, and stuff like that, it usually means I made you a beat. Like, that's what they consider the producer to be, but that's not at all what the producer is when you get into the more advanced stages of your career. And then there's recording, which is self-explanatory. That's when you record. Then there's mix prep. Mix prep is all the cleanup that you do, all the editing, all the vocal tuning, all the nudging, anything that needs to be done for the mix prep, any redos in the recording, anything that needs to be retaken, or whatever the case may be, and then mixing. So people mix up mixing and mastering all the time, and they call them the same thing or similar things, and they're not. They're two very, very different processes. So mixing, a mixing project might look like this. It's a very big project where you're putting together a lot of tracks, and mixing is basically 2 parts. Well, 3 parts. Your first job as a mixer is to, well, it's 2 parts with an overlying part. And the overlying part is that you're supposed to take what the intention of the song is and bring it out in a recorded form. So if somebody hands you a song and you perceive it to be very heavy, that's your job. Make the heavy song sound heavy. If it's flowy or blowy, make it sound like that. If it's very light, make it sound like that. That's your job as a mixer. So when they hand you these files, you're supposed to put them together in a way that translates what the equivalent of a live performance or a performance that's made up in someone's mind, if it's like something more abstract, and turn that into your actual mix. And that consists of a couple of things. So The first thing that you need to do is you need to put everything together like a puzzle. You have to make sure that everything is playing nice together, and you have to make sure that nothing is overlapping anything else, and that everything is when you press play, you want to hear all the things that the mixer wants you to hear in that moment, whatever that is. And there's different ways to balance it and move it around, but that's basically what you want to do in the first step. The second step is storytelling with mixing. And this is a little weird because it sometimes can be done through the song. And there's lots of times that I run into stuff where like I don't have to move it around too much, because if a song is written well, which again is the first process, then the song will move by itself the way that it's supposed to. It'll ebb and flow and move up and down just how it's supposed to. But there is stuff that happens when you process things, when you're using things like limiters and compressors to control dynamics. When you're using things like that, that change the dynamic performance of the song. And then what you have to do is go in and readjust and make sure that the song is flowing correctly. And what I mean by that is like, so, and that's using usually what we call automation, which is you're changing something in the track while the track is going. So say you have a snare, okay? Instead of changing the sound of a snare on a different track or inserting that, what you'd actually be doing is turning the snare down or up if you're using volume, or panning it left and right, or changing the frequency up and down, or some other kind of change that you're doing to the snare track. But this is true for every track on in the song. So if you're doing stuff with cymbals, and say the cymbals are very, very dynamic and you need to control them throughout the mix, and you have to squash them a little bit and get them to sit right, but then they're playing and they're kind of dull. They're not as huge and dynamic as you want them to be. You might need to turn them up a little bit for the hits to make sure that the song, when somebody's hitting the cymbals to create like the top of a beat, like a crash moment at the top of the beat, that needs to be accentuated. You have to bring that out. And that's what I mean by creating the flow of the song. If when you're done with the mix, if the song sounds flat all the way through and it's a very dynamic song, you didn't do your job. You have to make sure that not only are you mixing the song as a whole, but that you're mixing each section of the song as its own individual thing. And again, like that can be like say you have a breakdown in a hardcore song or something like that, or a metal song. Say it's a metalcore song with a breakdown. And the whole thing is, you know what I mean? Like that's one type of vibe that you're working on. But then it turns to jump, 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 jump. That's a totally different vibe. So you can't just put one mix on the music and then expect it to play correctly all the way through. It's not going to do so. You have to make adjustments in each section of the music to make sure that it flows correctly to the listener's ear. As a listener, you want to get the intention of each section, and you want all of the tricks that allow that to happen to be done in the mix. And, we talked a little bit about in the last video, but it bears repeating, and I don't even know if I said this in the last video, and you're going to hear me say this a lot as we get into mixing, but if you're trying to make something loud or stand out, then make everything else quiet. If you're trying to make, things sound quiet, then make things that are around it sound loud. Like when you use these natural dynamics like this, these tricks, you can move the listener's ear where you want them to go. Doing things like turning the kick up just 1 dB in a beatdown section can dramatically change the way that your brain perceives it. And that's what you're doing when you're mixing, is all of that stuff. You're not editing or tuning or doing any mix prep stuff. That's for this stage. You're not coming up with tones. You're not coming up with samples. You're not doing that. That's in the production stage. And you're certainly not writing the song for whoever or orchestrating it. That's in that stage. So to be very clear, mixing, what I just described, is the process of mixing. If you choose to do these things for other people, like if you get a client or a friend and they're like, hey, can you mix this for me? And they send you something and it's, it's a total nightmare session and it needs to be edited properly and, the vocals need to be tuned or whatever the case may be. You can choose to do that for them, but understand that that's a separate thing. They might ask you, please use your discretion with guitar tones for the song. Like maybe they're not, huge into guitar tones, or maybe you're so good that they just know that you're going to come up with a banging tone, and they want you to do that. That's fine, but that's not mixing. That's production. Same thing with drum samples. Like if they're like, sample at your discretion, do what you got to do to make it sound good. Fine, but that's not mixing. That's production. That's sound design. That's a completely different thing, and it should be done at a completely different stage or moment in time and in consideration. Mixing is you take what's given to you and you mix it. And that's it. It doesn't have, there's no creative choices other than how to creatively move the music. But when you're doing that, ideally as a mixer, you're doing so with the person that you're mixing for in mind and the song. It's not about you. It's not about your ego. It's about doing what's best with the song. That's the job. That's the job, is mixing. That is mixing. So we're clear on that. And then there's mastering. And people get these two mixed up all the time. And they're like, hey, so you're going to master the song? And I'm like, yeah, is it mixed? And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, bro, yeah, but again, like, it doesn't matter. Like, if you don't know, you don't know. So mastering is kind of a leftover thing. A lot of what happens in audio today is leftover from the analog days where mixing was very gate-kept. In the last 10 years or so, the last 20 years, mixing and mastering have gone from something that was only something that could be done in a few places to something that can be done by everyone that has a PC or a Mac. And that's a pretty dramatic change in gatekeeping. You know what I mean? And trust me, the people that run these, $1 million studios and stuff like that will do everything in their power to convince you that what they're doing is better than what you're doing, and it's not true. It's not true. It was true like 15 years ago, but I mean, things just keep getting better and better and better, and it's now we're at the point with amp sims and IRs and stuff like that. Like the guitar that you're putting on the record, 9 times out of 10, all the professional mixers that I see, that I talk to, like they all use amp sims, just because it's better, it's easier, it sounds better on the record. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound as good as a mic on a speaker, and then going into a DAW. It just doesn't sound as good. So, getting back to this, back in the day, if you had a mix engineer or a balance engineer, that was their job, and it was the only thing that they did. And they had the gear usually for that job, and it was a very specific skill set. And it was, like mixing engineers weren't mastering engineers, and vice versa. Okay? So when you mixed a song, you would mix it, and it would be at a very low level. And then you would send it out to a mastering engineer that has a completely different facility, a completely different set of tools. I remember going to a mastering engineer years and years ago. I was in this band called Collapse at a Reason, and we had done, I think we did a 3-song with Zeus, the famous Zeus, the man, the myth, the legend. And after we had finished it with Zeus, we brought it over to get mastered. And the mastering engineer's setup was so different from Zeus's. It was just like night and day. Like Zeus had a board and speakers and some outboard gear. This is all analog back in the day. And the mastering engineer had a bunch of different kinds of speakers and a bunch of different gear that looked nothing like what Zeus had. And the mastering engineer's job is to get the record or to get the song ready to go out to airwaves, to the radio, or now to streaming, or to printable stuff, etc., etc., etc. So that's what the mastering engineer does, and they use a bunch of different tools like limiters and compressors to bring first of all, their job is to bring the mix up to volume. They want it to reach a commercial volume, and then they want to, either for cohesion or because they think, just as a second pair of ears, that they can help the song do something. Like they might, add a little bit here, subtract a little bit there with an EQ, or add some compression or something like that. They might add the littlest bit here or the littlest bit there to get it to be more cohesive or to do a better thing. But that's basically the mastering job. And then they have to make sure that it sounds correct on every format. And that's why the mastering engineer that we went through had all these different speakers. He had like these really high-end speakers, and then some near fields and some mid fields, and he had a boom box and like a monocube. Did he have a monocube? I can't remember if he had a monocube, but he had something like the equivalent of a monocube. And he was listening to playback on all these different sources to make sure that the song translated everywhere. And I mean, if you've done any mixing in the past, you've probably done something that's the equivalent of that, like taking your mix out to the car to see how it sounds. I used to think that like the reason that you do that is so you make sure that it's going to sound good in the car, and it's actually not. The reason that we do that is because none of us that are here working in home studios or the equivalent or smaller studios have far field monitors. If you go to a big boy studio and they have, big, huge far field monitors sitting on the wall, that's what they use to mix their low end. And for most of us, the closest we can get to far field monitors is the car. So that's what these processes are. And that's the order in which they happen. And now it's worth saying that if your mastering doesn't sound good, there may be a problem in the mix. If you can't get your mix to sound good, there may be a problem with your mix prep. If there's a problem with your mix prep, there might be a problem with the production and the recording. And if there's a problem with the production and the recording and you just can't get it right, there might be a problem with the songwriting and the orchestration. And it works backwards like this. If this is good, if you get a song that's well written and well orchestrated, then this is a breeze. Production, well, if you know how to record, then production and recording are a breeze. It just comes very, very naturally. If you know what you want to do and you have a singleness of vision, then production's very, very easy to do. If you got 9 guys in a room and they all want to do different things, production's very hard. Recording is easy if you know how to do it, just like everything else. And when you're doing these things, if you've recorded the session well, then your mix prep will be that much easier. If you've made sure that when you're recording it, that the recording engineer has, or a producer has paid close attention to the timing and the guitars and your tuning. And trust me, everyone that comes here loves to tune their guitar, because trust me, it's like every time the tape stops, you tune. And I know it sounds really ball breaky, but I'm telling you, like, if you can get this right, this recording right, everything that follows after this is easier. And if you don't, it's harder. It's the same thing for vocal takes, drum takes. As far as beat making and stuff like that, it's the same thing when we talk about orchestration. But so if the recording is correct, the mix prep is really, really easy. You might have to nudge something a little bit here and a little bit there, but it won't be crazy. If the recording is bad and you did a bad recording process, then you might have to do a shit ton of mix prep. And that's going to affect the mixing. And then that in turn will affect the mastering. And, one of the things that they say all the time is, record like there's no mixing, mix like there's no mastering. And it's just to give you an idea of like how, like the mindset that you should have when you approach these things. Like you should try to get the best possible signal when you're recording. You should try to get the best possible performance. Capture is king. Capture will always be king when it comes to this process. The best capture you have, the easier the rest of these steps are. And that's just a universal truth. So back to songwriting for a second. Another huge problem that happens in songwriting, and listen, I'm not going to tell you how to write a song. Like there's a million different ways to write a song. And I work with artists all over the world that have all sorts of different kinds of music. This stuff from like drugged out, like trap, to hip hop, to metal, to industrial, to stuff that's a mix of everything in between. I did a country record, whatever. It's all the same principle when it comes to songwriting. If it's a good song, it's a good song. You'll be able to tell right away. But there is the problem of orchestration. And that's a lot of people don't know about orchestration, and they don't know what to do. And I looked around for a couple of examples to pull up to show you, but it really wasn't any good. There's no real good visual representation. Like the best thing you do is find like an orchestra chart with like frequencies on it. But that doesn't really tell the story either, because you can use different things for different things. But when you're songwriting, whatever kind of song that it is that you're writing, you want to make sure, and I think I said this already in an earlier video, I'm fucking terrible at it. You want to make sure that you're not cluttering up a frequency range with too much bullshit. And what I mean by that is, so if we look at, let me just pull up an EQ. So if we look at the frequency range of what we have here, Jesus, that's G1. So C4 is right here. Middle C is right here. Okay? So if we're talking about frequency ranges and stuff like that, guitars might live right here as a mid-rangey instrument. Your bass and your kick drum are going to live down here. Your snare will live over here in the mid-range. And then there's stuff, there's like high-end stuff that happens like harmonically that you might want to keep or whatever. You want to be careful not to clutter up too much information in there. So if you have a guitar part, and let's say the guitar takes up this much space in the mix, and say that you want it to be very prominent, that you want a very guitar-based mix, okay? This might be like what your guitar looks like as it's playing. The more stuff that you put in this range, the more that you're going to have to compensate for the guitar. All right? So if you decide to put a synth in here, and the synth takes up here, and here, and here, and here, that's fine. If you want to put another synth in, and that synth takes up here, and here, and here, you can see where I'm going with this, right? This is a fucking mess. And in order to get this to sound correct, something's going to have to go. You're going to have to sacrifice something. You can't layer sounds over sounds. It's a universal principle of sound, is that you can only hear so many sounds at once. I didn't make that up. Don't get mad at me. It just is what it is. It's if you look at any orchestration from classical music, you'll see how, especially with the masters, with like Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms, Chopin, Tchaikovsky, if you look at where everything is put in the orchestration, everything has its own place. Everything has its own job. Everything is doing something specific. And I do this. I tend to overwrite in the same place, but these days I've gotten better at it. And And now when if I have something like a guitar that, again, it's taking up like here, like let's say these frequencies or whatever, like this is guitar. If I have something else that's in these frequencies, I'm mindful enough now to know that they both can't be in front after mixing for, 15, 16 years. So when I'm writing, and this again goes back to the writing process, which is the first thing. I want to be wary of this. I want to know that, like, if I have a synth here, that it's going to be lower than the guitar, if that's what I want. And, like, if it's a synth-based project or whatever, and the guitar is just textural, then, like, that's fine. But, like, I know where I want these things to be in the mix before they happen while I'm writing the song, if that makes sense. I don't want, to just throw a bunch of shit against the wall and see what sticks. I don't want to just keep, barraging this area, like, I have 3-4 different guitar parts all playing different things in the exact same register. You know what I mean? Like, that's going to sound like dog shit. And I don't mean like, one guitar playing a riff, and then the second guitar playing the third, and then the third guitar playing the fifth, and then the fourth guitar playing the octave. I mean the first guitar playing the root notes, the second guitar playing the root notes, the third guitar playing other root notes, and the fourth guitar playing other similar root notes. So you have 4 guitars stacked up on top of each other here, all in this place, and they're all playing different things that have nothing to do with each other. You know what I mean? Like, this one might be the main riff, and this is a polyrhythm that you think is cool, and this is a polyrhythm to that, and this is a polyrhythm to that, and they're all going chug 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 chug, and it's just bullshit. It's nonsense. So if you give that to a mixer, the mixer's going to look at you and go, I can't mix this. This is nonsense. Like, some of this has got to go. And it goes back to here. It goes back to this principle. Songwriting, orchestration. So again, when you get this right, this becomes very, very, very easy. And all the rest of it becomes easy all the way down the line. So that's the order of operations as far as getting things right. That's the order of operations as far as what you should be concerned with first. First, get a good song. Second, make sure it's orchestrated correctly. Third, make sure that any production that you're doing on it is done properly. Fourth, record it properly. Make sure that you're working with someone that knows how to get a good capture. Fifth, mix prep. Make sure your mix prep is done. Make sure all your editing is done, in whatever the case may be. I forgot what number we're at. 5, 6, 7. The next thing is to make sure that you get a mix engineer that can translate the song. And finally, if you're working with a mastering engineer, that they're going to get it to the finish line to where it needs to be. You want to make sure that all of these things are good working backwards so that you don't run into problems. And sometimes that means taking a second look at your song, at what you did, at what you thought was good, and maybe rewriting some sections because they might have hit hard in practice or whatever with that many layers, but when it comes to the mix, it just turns into mud, and you don't know. But like, this is a cheat code for a good sounding song in production. If you get this right, everything else follows. If you don't, there'll be problems all the way down the line. So start here and don't skip any steps moving down. And another thing concerning production is that you might hire when I'm using the word production here, production again has a ton of different definitions. But when I'm talking about production here, I'm talking about picking tones, mic placements, colors and timbres of instruments. And the producer might actually go back into this step with you, which I've done with a bunch of bands that I produced, and just change some stuff. Because that bass line that you thought was banging is just root notes, and it sounds like shit. And it's cluttering up the production. Or, that vocal line is incorrect for where you're at. This happens all the time. When I work as a producer, I always have to go back into this and dial it in. And I'm also working in all these steps as well. So there's that version of a producer as well that kind of overarches and oversees the project. And you know, it's an incredible job. It's an incredible thing to do for someone to trust you with their music enough that you're kind of allowed to bend and twist and move things around so that when it's recorded, it's going to sound incredible. It's a lot of responsibility, but it's very rewarding. But anyway, so that's that. And that actually turned into a much longer explanation video than I thought it was going to be. And I'm sorry that, you know, that wasn't more exciting. I'm sorry that all of this isn't like more exciting. It's just like a series of lectures. But this is for stuff that this is for people that really want to know this stuff. And there isn't, you know, like I could put like a bunch of like bells and whistles and like, you know, jump cuts and all the shit that people do to try and make it, you know, to keep your attention span. But this isn't like that. This is just a series of lectures. So that's today. And I think next time we're going to get into mixing tricks, which before we get into actual mixing, I'm just going to give away a bunch of secrets and tricks. Maybe not so secret, but stuff that I've learned in the past that's helped me immensely when it comes to mixing, just stuff I can do. Like, for example, like how to treat overheads if you just want them to kind of sound like cymbals. Like, what's the easiest way to do with that? I wrestled with that for like 5 years. Now I have a method that I use every time, and it works every time. I'll show you how to do that. Some other stuff, bunch of other stuff is coming. And then we're going to get into actually mixing songs and seeing how it goes. But I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, if you need mixing, mastering, production, any of those services, I'm available, and I'm happy to help you with whatever it is that you need. Click the link below for Modiface Studios, which is my website. And just fill out the quick questionnaire and schedule a phone call, and we'll talk about your project. I'm totally stoked on it already, whatever it is. I will see you guys soon. Peace and blessings.